everyone. What's up? What's up? What's up? We're gonna give a few minutes to let people settle in, come in for this latest Hot New Hip Hop live stream. For those of you unaware, my name is Gabriel Bras Nevares. I am a news writer for Hot New Hip Hop, and I'm here with our wonderful one of our features editors, Aaron. Aaron, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. Really excited for this conversation today. We're going to be talking about some of our greatest hip hop legends of the 20th and 21st centuries, and one of our biggest legends of the 21st century. So
Hmm.
we're going to be talking a lot about the comparisons between them. Specifically, we're going to be breaking down the recent Roots picnic performance from the one and only Jay-Z alongside the Roots, and a whole bunch of guests as well. We're going to be talking about Lil Wayne and some recent news about the Carter 7 being on the way, and a bit of a retrospective on the Carter series as a whole. And we're also going to be talking about the inevitable discourse about Jay-Z's disses in the freestyle, specifically the ones towards Drake, because a lot of people feel like he might be responding via a diss track, via subliminals, and just like the discourse going on around these two potentially duking it out. And yeah, we're really excited to talk with you all and have this discussion. Please make sure to let us know your thoughts on all of this in the chat. We'll be responding to you guys, making sure that everything's running smooth. And yeah, we're just it's been a lot. It's been a lot. I don't know how you feel, Aaron, but it was a very eventful past week for sure.
It has definitely been an eventful week. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think just knowing Jay Z was going to touch the stage for the first time was enough to get my excitement up a little bit. I didn't really expect it to go the direction it went in. I was just more excited just to hear the songs. You know what I mean? I didn't think it would turn into a week long discussion, but I've been proven wrong. You know what I
Uh,
mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to kick it off with that, then, this Roots picnic performance obviously is generating a lot of headlines for a lot of the disses throughout it, but also because of the state property reunion, the Philly love that was shown on stage. And so I wanted to ask you, Aaron, what do you think is one of your main takeaways from the Roots picnic performance?
I mean, I think the main takeaway was still like the freestyle at the top, just because I think that's been one of the things that's been I've been thinking about the most, just because I think the discussion has been very unavoidable. But it's great to just see Jay Z at the age he is, still performing at like such a high level, and treating hip hop like the art form it needs to be treated as. Because and one of the biggest maybe complaints people have had about hip hop performances over the past 5-10 years is that backing tracks, people don't really know how to rap live. The skill set of rapping isn't like being shown on a live stage. Like people aren't really emceeing, and it felt like a great display of watching someone of Jay's stature still showing that like he got it on every level of the performance. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's like we've probably been to dozens, if not hundreds, of shows at this point that like when you see someone like Jay-Z and he's able to command the stage in the same way he always has throughout his career, it's kind of something like it's something to marvel at, and it's something that I feel is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially the kind of retrospective that he gives on his own career by mixing in some verses from one song and incorporating it into another. I thought that was one of the most creative parts of the set overall. And it really added to this idea that Jay-Z was not only going through like a discography, but also kind of rediscovering himself in the process in a way. It's his first, headlining set and proper performance in years and years. And I think that he really kind of lived up to that as far as not just, having a pretty representative view of his catalog, but also just having to challenge himself and to really get into a zone that he hadn't found himself in a long time. And it feels like it was really a lot getting off of his chest.
Mm.
And I think you could just kind of like feel a lot of that pressure in a lot of points of the set, but also like the gratitude, the appreciation, the love, the enjoyment of just like everything he's done so far. And I think that by starting off things with this freestyle after the Ogie Dogie intro. I think that it also really established an energy for not just like his attitude during this set, but what he might be doing moving forward. So speaking about that freestyle in particular, what was the thing that stuck out to you the most as far as like the quality and the nature of his disses and the position that he's in right now? Like, do you think that he is in a position to be like going at Drake and Nicki and Ye and all these people? We've seen, some people like Joe Budden say that all of that is like kind of beneath him at this point. But what do you think, especially given all the recent sort of like discourse and controversy surrounding Jay-Z?
I think it's first. I wanted to shout out OG Bobby Dash because definitely seeing State Property and The Rock together was amazing, and I'm glad that he did it. Do I think Jay-Z is above it? I don't know because I think like Jay-Z is now an institution, and then as an institution and as a corporate guy, and we've seen him probably more so as the corporate guy over the past I don't know probably 5 to 10 years at least, right? Like his main focus has been his businesses, but especially within the past 5 years, that seeing him kind of respond to everybody, I think it was maybe the one opportunity that he felt was like appropriate to address everybody. Because at the same time, like with everybody else, with Kanye, with Nicki, with Drake, with Dame, with whoever it is, everybody's talking on the internet. Jay's never on. Jay acts like he's not on the internet. I think like it's safe to say that he sees all the conversations that are happening. Um, I don't know if he's necessarily above it because I feel like if he still wants to be a rapper, we're gonna have to just respect him as a rapper. And if he wants to get in the mud with everybody and play that game as a rapper, he could play that game. And it's like we can't really stop him, but at the same time, it feels like you're taking a bunch of like issues that people have with your corporate and like business stances, and then like airing them out on through a channel or through a medium of rap, which to me is like I don't think necessarily confusing, but I think is like it's a choice. It's a choice for Jay-Z to use that as the way to address it. But I think at the same time, the past like year and some change has largely focused on, a lot of negative aspects of his career rather than all of his accomplishments. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you mentioned about him sort of responding to a big forum through the thing that he originally broke through in is one of the more like divisive aspects of these disses. Because, for example, I think for somebody like Dame Dash, that history is just there no matter what. But in the case of Drake, for example, where he's talking about, the crackers own your publishing. There's also the specific the dig at him surpassing him on the Billboard charts, where it's like you're looking at the wrong chart. I think that is kind of the debate that a lot of people are having. For example, also from Bobby Dash, who says it's hip hop. Sometimes you have to pop off and remind people, which is
I mean,
definitely
that's
true.
true. Very true.
And yeah, for sure. And I think that the disconnect then comes from, once Jay-Z is in this billionaire position, how much weight does it hold for him to be engaging in rap battles like through that specific argument? Because it's not necessarily a question of like lyricism or influence, at least like in the direct framing of it. Instead, it is the money talk. Instead, it is the power, the money, power, and respect. And I think that has been something that I've also kind of been thinking about too, where it's if there was actually going to be sort of like a consequence to this, and if this was going to spill out into sort of like further back and forths, I think that as far as the discourse, a lot of that talk is already kind of settled. Jay is already at the level he's at. Somebody like Drake or Nicki are already at the levels that they're at, and I think that it wouldn't really change so much as far as the other fan base's perception of like the opposing artists and things like that. And on that note, because I keep coming back to Nicki, because I think that the money talk and all that is very relevant, but I think that the Nicki diss specifically felt, I think, a little bit more personal, and it felt a little bit more like specifically referencing conflicts that they've had. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you think there was sort of like that difference there between Drake and Nicki? And for everybody in the comments, chime in as well. How do you see sort of like the difference between talking to somebody like Drake about the money and then going to talk to somebody like Nikki about the I guess sort of like heavier and more like personal stuff?
I mean, it's weird because I think on both fronts it feels like Nicki and Drake, whatever their like grievances are, stem from a very, I don't want to say similar place, but it does stem from business standings. Like with Nicki, she's kind of made it clear that this is all related to like the title payout and X, Y, and Z. Whereas like with Drake, it's a whole. I feel like there is like a idols turn rivals tension there, and I think with Drake, the only other person he could kind of gun for at this point in his career, if he does choose to gun at anybody, would be someone like Jay-Z, because I think that would be the only time he could go into battle and be the underdog. Like he wasn't in every other situation. He was never, well, not every other situation, but at least the past two major conflicts, he hasn't been the underdog. He's still been as popular as ever. So I think it was interesting for him to choose to address Nicki in the way he did. Um, I don't really know how I feel about it because I feel like it was like a very personal job, but at the same time, it's like Nicki's also, she said stuff about his family too. So it's like, at what point, like, where's the line? You can't,
Yeah.
if you make a mention of, if you say something about somebody's family, you can't be mad that they're getting at your family. Like, if we're saying certain things are off limits, then certain things are off limits. You can't cross the line and be like, this person crossed the line after I already crossed the line. So I feel with Nicki, like, I personally don't think we're gonna hear like another response from her. At least like there might be like a little rap job, but I think if she does address it, it'll probably be in the form of another tweet storm.
Mhm.
Whereas I think with Drake, I think he genuinely does like wanna see this conflict turn into like a back and forth because I think he's desperate for his get back. But I think with
Sure.
Nicki specifically, she's just looking at it as like, yo, I have an issue with him. Let me air it out. And Jay Z's basically on some like, well, let me shove this to the side. Because I think for the most part, this whole freestyle has just been him brushing things off of his shoulders, so to speak.
Yes, yes, which would have been a nice transition into Dirt Off Your Shoulder, but that came later in the set.
For sure.
But I think that that conversation you're having about like Nicki and Drake specifically, it also brings up a criticism that we've seen a lot in the discourse, which is his GQ interview, which a couple of months ago he said that he doesn't know if the culture, hip hop culture, needs battling anymore. And a lot of people are looking at this freestyle and being like, well, didn't you say that, battles, wouldn't necessarily, be good for the culture like a couple of months ago, and calling him a hypocrite over it. Some people are giving him the grace of like, maybe he just like said, you know what? You guys are right. Let me actually get down into the mud. Maybe he, is going to excuse it in some other way. But I thought it was interesting to see that discourse because he was talking more so about how beef spills out on the internet and how like stan bases, kind of like turn against each other in that way. And going back to what we were talking about with the money talk, that's kind of one of the ways in which you can kind of mitigate that at least a little bit. You're not going to fully because the fans are the fans, but if you stick it to that, then there's not as much of an opportunity for things to spill over. And so I wanted to ask you and the audience for your thoughts. Do you think it is like a hypocritical perspective from him? Do you think that it was a more nuanced take than what people are giving him credit for? Or do you think this is just always, because at the end of the day, Jay-Z is, Drake has his subliminals reputation, but Jay-Z is like the man at that in a lot of
He taught
ways.
him how to do that, in my opinion. Like I think
Exactly.
Jay Z is very much when it comes to the subs, he I mean, like I think it was the Cameron interview a couple months ago where like he like was like, "Yo, that line in Otis,"
Hmm.
he was like that was actually directed to me, and then everybody was like, "Wait, that was directed at you?" And Jay Z just, and I'm sure same thing with Drake. I'm sure in like there's not an immediate example that comes to mind, but I'm sure there's stuff that we unearthed years down the line. We're like, oh, it is what it is. But I think like I don't know. I think Jay Z was right in his assessment in the GQ article about I just don't think people are like I think because we have the internet, the sort of conversations that were unhinged that were happening maybe during the height of the Jay Z and Nas beef, those were kept on like those weren't on the internet. It wasn't a broader discourse except for like personal circles of people debating hip hop. Now it's like everybody's getting into the conversation. Then you got to
Mhm.
add like, I mean, you don't have to add, but then you have like bots, and there's like these stand bases that like really, they rally behind their favorite, and there's basically no barrier. Like the second it's on the internet, just people can say whatever they want, and it feels like there's no consequences. So I feel like Jay-Z was mainly speaking to that. But I think if he is aware of that happening and he's still deciding to go into this beef, like I mean, anything could really happen, but that's obviously a risk you're going to take if you decide to engage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I think another factor that I haven't seen as many people bring up is that, Iceman came out and that was after the GQ interview. And now he was like, okay, well, maybe now I have a reason to kind of get into it and address it in some more subliminal
Mm.
ways that I've done, in the past. And I do agree that there isn't really, that his assessment in the GQ interview is correct. And I think that, talking about that aspect of hip hop battle specifically, that is something that, has very much gone beyond the culture's control.
Mhm.
But I think the consequence of that, in my opinion, is that you end up establishing a bit of like a high ground per se, like in the conversation. And by referencing like the on Rivera situation, I think he showed that like I'm gonna go like I'm gonna reference like anything.
That was maybe
But
my biggest takeaway, to be honest. But
mm, yeah, because I think it's just kind of it's very tough to see, especially for somebody that is as publicly talked about as Jay-Z, for them to have that sort of to have this just like explosion like off rip.
mm,
And it's also causing a lot of conversation about what's going to happen next. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you think, like, what do you think is the effect of the freestyle kind of overshadowing the performance itself? I know he has like some Yankee Stadium shows that are probably going to
mm.
have, a lot more things to talk about, but how did you find that sort of effect of the freestyle kind of like preceding all the other conversations around, state property finally coming together, and all these other things?
I mean, I think it was just kind of, I don't know, like maybe a little bit weird, because not weird in a bad sense, but also just because it's like this is your first performance in X, Y, and Z. Of course, we expect you to like maybe address some things here and there. Did we expect that to be the first thing you did off the
Mhm.
top? Um, Maybe not, but you lead in with that, and then like you're basically going through your whole back catalog, and we're also, we're celebrating the blueprint, we're celebrating Reasonable Doubt, and that almost becomes a afterthought in this dialogue. I feel like we look at this whole thing and we're looking at it from like, oh, Jay-Z dissed a bunch of people outside of the fact of like two of his greatest albums and two of arguably some of the greatest works in hip hop are reaching incredible milestones that we still get to witness
Mhm.
in the 2020s. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, those Yankee Stadium shows I think are definitely going to complete the story, I guess.
Hmm.
And I wonder if he's going to have more like freeze, because he might say like I'm not going to do the freestyle at these. Like that is what I led with and that's all I'm
Hmm.
going to say about it. But with this conversation about next moves, I wanted to ask you, do you think that he's going to have this energy on his purported next album that he might be rolling out?
I can't say because it's like really, I never imagined a 444 to come out from Jay Z, and then he
Mm,
came with easily one of his best albums in years with that.
mhm.
And then he did a joint project with Beyonce, and then Jay Electronica dropped his debut album. So I just don't know what to expect from Jay Z at this point.
Yeah,
It
and
could
that's
be,
a really exciting.
I am excited to hear what a Jay Z album sounds like in his mid 50s for sure.
Mhm.
I just don't know like what we'll expect, because if it's like basically an album of him just like trying to fight everybody and like beat whatever things are coming in his direction, I don't know how engaging that's going to be. But
Mhm.
who knows?
Yeah, and that's always like the great thing about having artists like Jay Z and like Lil Wayne, for example,
Mhm.
that are still in the game, that are still dropping projects. We see sort of like how they are not just progressing their careers, but progressing themselves. And I think for somebody like Jay-Z, people really appreciated that 444 drop, and they're excited to see a similar evolution maybe on this next album. I agree that I don't know if it's going to be this full energy. If anything, it's going to be about the more sort of like serious, like, legal stuff and all of that, as
Mm.
far as reflecting on it family wise. But it's, I think it's that conversation about depth and maturity and evolution is something that has also kind of been happening a lot with one of the people that Jay-Z inspired the most, and one of his fellow rap legends, and that's Lil Wayne. And for those of
Until
you
Carter.
unaware, Lil Wayne recently said that the Carter 7 is on the way. He doesn't know if it's going to be like whatever album that he's just going to call the Carter 7, or if he's going to build it from the ground up. And that's caused a lot of discourse, including from you, Aaron. You recently wrote a piece called It's Time for Lil Wayne to Retire the Carter series. And I wanted to ask you, just off rip, to start this Lil Wayne convo, why do you think that is?
I mean, I think if I'm being very honest with you, I feel like after the Carter 4, it should have just retired. I think the
Mm-hmm.
only reason that a Carter 5 managed to sustain itself is because there was so much of a backstory behind it, and such a lead up between the Cash Money legal situation, between Martin Shkreli getting his hand on it. But like, I just don't feel like whoever is on his team is really working his best interest. And I think like even watching some of his recent concerts, I was at the OVO Fest a couple of years ago when he announced the Carter
Mm-hmm.
6, and the one thing I noticed the most about that set was that the majority of the set was like post 2000s Wayne, with a few Carter 3 singles, but like largely just like the hit records. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I think like for me, I want to hear Wayne on the top of the world. I don't want to hear a bunch of random selection of songs put into one project and then like presented. Because the Carter 6, I think most people felt like was one of the biggest disappointments, at least that year, but maybe even of Lil Wayne's career. I don't think it'll have the type of retrospective appreciation that an album like Rebirth had. Or even the Carter 4, to be quite fair
Mm-hmm.
with you. I just don't think Lil Wayne like needs to make a Carter series, another Carter album, unless it's contributing to what the Carter was, which was like at every point up until the Carter 3, a buildup of where his skill was, where his dominance was, and where his hunger
Mm-hmm.
was as an MC. And I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but for me, it's like I like Wayne, but want to like I don't want to have to like look at the Carter series and be like, this just turned into a disappointment just because it's like a brand now more than it is like an actual body of work that we appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. It's more of it's just kind of expected at this point, and the
Mhm.
Carter felt much more like an event before. And people have their own ideas about how Lil Wayne could bounce back. For example, shout out to Jerry Aaron one on Instagram, said Wayne needs to do an album with top tier producer like Cool and Dre, or Street Runner, or just Manny Fresh. And I think that that's definitely something that on a production side of things, a track like Peanuts and Elephant off Carter 6, for example, got memed to
Mhm.
death, and that's a big part of criticisms that people have had of Wayne, like as of late. And I agree that it definitely feels like sometimes like the people around him and in his team, maybe like from our glance is just like looking
Mhm.
from the outside in. Maybe we have that assumption. Maybe this is all just his plan and what he wants to do, and he doesn't really care too much about what people think about it. It's a music that he likes, but it definitely feels like there is a little bit of a lack of focus or intent, especially with his recent comments about the Carter 7. Um, and it's made me, go back and re-listen to all the records and really think about how each of them, not only like you said, kind of like marked him at specific points in his career, but also what type of rapper he was demonstrating himself as on these records, how his writing style evolved over
Mhm.
time, how his approach to wordplay and punchlines. It's just kind of, and there's also a lot of stuff like, outside of the music. Shout out to the Don Roddy who said it's not the music, it's the way Wayne looks now. Before, everyone wanted to dress like him and be like him. So it's also that aspect of influence as well to talk about. And
Yeah.
with this sort of retrospective, I wanted to ask you real quick, what do you think is the best Carter in the series?
I think the Carter 2. I think I'm gonna always say the Carter 2. Like I love the Carter 3. The Carter 3 is such a phenomenal body of work, and it was like living through that moment. It was very much a moment to see him hit a million a week, and like the way Millie rocked out everywhere, the way Lollipop was everywhere when in the lead up to the album. Um, I don't know. I just think the Carter 2 was like an excellent. I think it was like just conceptually thorough for him, and it was like even sonically, just as thorough. And like you had all these amazing records that to this day still feel as fresh and as new as they did back then. So for me, I'd probably give it to the Carter 2. Probably go to Carter 1 after that, Carter 3, Carter 4, Carter 5, Carter 6.
Yes, definitely 4, 5, and 6 are in my bottom as well. I really found myself loving. Shout out to Jerry Aaron who agrees with you on the Carter 2, and also another shout out over here to Jerry Aaron. He said because Wayne's producer is Manny G, and Mac Main said he doesn't do the music side of business anymore. So also like the circle itself is kind of gone in their own ways. I really found myself enjoying the Carter 1 so much on a revisit. I hadn't listened to it in years. And one thing that really struck me about it was just, Lil Wayne is a punchline king. And as far as like sounding slick and confident and boisterous and larger than life on a track, like there may be no rapper with the amount of quotables of Wheezy F Baby. Like there's no way. Right. But I think on the Carter 1, he displays it, I think, with a bit more force on the Carter 2, and it's a little bit more full throttle in a way. Shout out to Jerry Aaron as one again, who said, Wayne can still rap his ass off, he just needs a better team around him. But I think that in the Carter 1, for a track like I Miss My Dog, for example, like you see him very much switch gears rapidly, where he's not focusing so much on wordplay and punchlines. He's more descriptive. He's more evocative. His use of imagery is like really, really striking, and just like emotionally like confessing in a way where, he's talking about being in the street and all that. And then on that track, I Miss My Dog, he's like, remember all the times that we got out of trouble because we had to go like do our thing. And it felt, looking back on it, like it's the kind of reflection and introspection that he would get a lot of praise for on the Carter 3. For example, the track Tie My Hands, which is, more related to bigger things. But I think that on Carter 1, it's just like maybe it's a sort of like, first experience bias, as far as like the first project he put out, but just sounds so hungry, so alive. And the way, BMJR, Go DJ, like just so many like just like bangers on it. And I think that still he was able to balance it with this like very crisp production, paying homage to what was going on in New Orleans in the South at the time, while still coming through with these very like clean and pristine, tracks that really like it also like really emphasizes why Lil Wayne needs a live band to perform, because so much of his tracks are like really rooted in that in that shine. And I think the Carter 1 is like such a great example of it. And Carter 3 is I think unbelievably impressive album, and I think that it is such a great distillation of his talents and a lot of his great things. I just think that it maybe hasn't. I think the Carter 1 has aged. It's frozen in its time in a better way and a more I think accessible way than maybe going back to a track like Lollipop, where you hear like the first synths and you're like, yeah, I remember this song. But then you see how it like builds and like goes into all these dramatic directions and things like that. It's like, I don't remember the song being that like long. So I think that by the Carter 4 and 5 and 6, you already start to see like a bit more of like the feature bloat, a little bit more of like throwaway tracks and things like that. And I don't know, it's just been interesting to see how the quality control has evolved over the series, and also just kind of how such a simple concept at first that he's not necessarily shying away from is not something he's living up to, because he's trying to establish dominance and all that, but it's just a little bit more like difficult. Shout out to Jerry Aaron again. He said Street Runner said on IG yesterday he's down to do a tape with Wayne Nails in Wayne's court, which could be interesting. And I don't know, it's got me thinking as well about how, the way that Lil Wayne has evolved throughout his career, when compared to somebody like Jay-Z. Do you think that it is something deeper than just a quality control thing? Do you think there's like a more of an artistic marker between their directions?
I think there's probably like I think there's just a different approach. I think Wayne is like maybe one of the hardest working rappers that hip hop has ever seen step foot in the booth. Like I just don't think it's like it's
Hmm.
possible to deny it, but I think when you're like recording at such a pace, you're not really keeping track of everything. And I think that's been like one of like Wayne's biggest issues is that he's like, I just sit in the studio and I record all day and that's all I do and I don't do anything else. I just record music. And it's like, all right, but like now your performances aren't great because you're not remembering your lyrics because you're recording so much music that you don't really know
Hmm.
what's going out into the world. So I think like with Wayne, it's like purely a skill approach. Like I'm a great rapper and I will always just be a great rapper. Whereas like with Jay, it's a little bit more encompassing of what he does. And also, I think Jay Z's also probably had a better attempt at aging in hip hop while adapting to a younger generation. I know we look at the Blueprint 3 as like an album that is kind of like a miss in his catalog, but I do think it's important in just the sense that it was him embracing the younger generation. Whether it hit or not was is a completely different conversation, but it was him extending his arms to the younger generation where it feels like sometimes Wayne has to collaborate with the younger generation in
Hmm.
order. I don't want to say that to be relevant, but it sounds like he just does it because it seems like the thing to do at the time. There's like not
Hmm.
really much intent behind it where it's like I've mentioned this so many times in the past, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in my piece as well. But it's like I think Wayne needs to lock in with someone like Manny Fresh. I forgot who mentioned that, but Manny Fresh is definitely someone who understands Wayne's artistic DNA. I think,
Hmm.
quite frankly, Tyler the Creator is also somebody as a producer who I think would be amazing at giving Lil Wayne direction on a full album. And if that were
Hmm.
the case, then I think we could like another entry in the Carter series would make so much sense. But I think like the whole thing is like, as he mentioned in that interview, he just records a bunch of songs and then somebody else just picks and chooses what works and then they bundle it up and then they
Hmm.
put it out and it's called another. It's like a Carter 7, it's a Carter 8, it's a Carter 9, and it's like we don't really. At that point, we already know what we got with the Carter 6, so it's like why are we gonna look at the Carter 7 any differently?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that's like a really important part as far as being selective with it. We have some IG comments to get to. Jerry Aaron said, "This Wayne just makes the music, and his team picks songs. He needs to be more involved in choosing tracks. When Birdman was around, the right tracks got picked." So that gets into the team conversation. Shout out to Fade the Don as well, who said No Ceiling was my favorite. We could definitely have a long conversation about how
For
Wayne's mixtape run was super, super important to
sure.
establishing himself as like the best rapper alive. And I think that that would also be, that's also like important to contextualize in the Carter series because you have that more of a distinction between I'm rapping over beats and then I'm rapping over like my,
Mm,
these are my songs. Shout out to
exactly.
Jerry Aaron again, who said this Wayne just makes the music and his team picks songs. Oh yeah, sorry, I got to you already, Jerry Aaron. My bad. Shout out to I'll Do It Big, who asks, "Do you truly think C5 is trash?" I don't think C5 is trash. I'm sorry if we gave that impression. C5 is not trash. There's still like tracks like Mona Lisa and the oh my god, I'm forgetting the title. My apologies. But the
There's some
immediate
good
preceding
tracks on
one
that
with Nicki,
album.
there's some good tracks for sure. We got Uproar on it as far as like a
Yeah.
banger. Like Carter Five was definitely, I think that it was also like way overhyped with the label drama and stuff like that. And I think with time, people have been able to give it a little bit more grace. Jerry Aaron again, Imagine Wayne album produced by Alchemist, that would be fire. And shout out to Don Roddy on YouTube, said his swag was untouchable 0809 until Truck Fit, then it started declining, and then Wayne stopped caring how he looked and started skating. I don't know
That's
if the
another
skating was.
interesting conversation, though. I had a conversation,
Mhm.
just a side note. I interviewed a Travi McCoy a couple of years ago from Jim
Oh,
God's Heroes,
nice.
and he
Mhm.
was on tour with Lil Wayne, and he said specifically that Wayne's stylist was like snooping through his dressing room, and that was basically the catalyst to the I guess the truck fit Wayne that
Mhm.
you're talking about post '09.
Oh, yeah, and that's also, yeah, and again, like just going to show just like the breadth of his
Mhm.
influence. Shout out to I'll Do It Big again, who said C5 had too many songs but still a solid album. I agree. And I think that it's also been interesting to see like the amount of time in between the Carter projects, because new generations of listeners are picking up on Wayne and hearing about this legend, and maybe they think, okay, well, I'm going to tune in. What's a Carter 5 sounding like? What's a Carter 6 sounding like? And maybe they might be, disappointed and they have to go and do more research. How do you think that relationship is with like fans today looking at Wayne's catalog, and how the way he's treated the Carter has kind of like maybe shifted that, or made things a little bit more, I guess, people have to unfortunately explain, no, Lil Wayne is actually one of the goats. Like,
I mean, I think that's kind of the problem because I look at his God's verse or God did verse as like a good reference point because it's him just acknowledging his influence. But I think part of it is like the influence that he had on a younger generation, or at least the one that he's acknowledging, is like almost purely aesthetic, and it has less to do with the music. And I don't really know how people really, I don't really know how people view like Lil Wayne from a younger generation point. But I would imagine they look at him as somebody who influenced their favorite rapper. But if I was a younger person and like the Carter 4 was the first time I listened to Lil Wayne, or the Carter 5 was the first time I listened to Lil Wayne, I might not be able to understand why people are talking about him in the same way. But like I think there's like really at this point we're like 20 years removed from 2006. Like there's like you kind of need to like find the history and the context behind why it was so important and why what Wayne was doing at that point in his career was so new to everybody at that point in time, you know?
yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Don Roddy, who said Wayne was on tour with Gym Class Heroes '08. I was at the Oakland show.
Shout out.
But yeah, I totally agree that that's like a really important part of just like how the discourse evolved, is that now we're so far removed that regardless of what's happening with the Carter, you still have to go back and you still have to really make that do that homework, as people say.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, like, with his legend status in mind, like, do you think there's legitimate pressure for him to really like bounce back with Carter 6, or do you think it's going to be more of like a business as usual sort of thing?
I mean, I feel like it'll probably end up being business as usual. I feel like to a certain point, you just kind of the expectations that you have, you can't just project on other people, you know. So it's like even with someone like Lil Wayne, as much as I'd love to see him do something like extraordinary on the Carter 7, I've just come to terms with the fact that we probably are just gonna get like a repeat of the Carter 6. And if he delivers anything more than that, then I think we should be happy about it. But at the end of the day, I think Lil Wayne is really like he's turning into a legacy act, and I can't blame him. Like when you've been working as long as he has, you gotta eventually just like reap the fruits of your labor and just like kind of be able to coast. But I think Wayne trying to compete with a younger generation, or even just like contribute into hip hop dialogue with albums that are mid at best. I feel like it only works against him, especially when he starts airing his grievances out about Super Bowls and Grammys and all these different institutions, like effectively, ignoring him. Jerry Aaron 1 says Wayne needs to do a mixtape, bounce back after the Carter 6, and next album should be I'm Not a Human Being 3, Not Carter, Can't Ruin Legendary Series. I agree. I think he needs to do a mixtape. I feel like that would be great. And I'll do it big. Crazy because Thug, NBA, Playboy get so much love stealing everything, Wayne, but the skills. I couldn't agree. And like that summarizes my feelings about Lil Wayne and the younger generation. I think they've taken everything from him except his rapping abilities.
Yeah, 100%. And there's definitely been some flashes, but for the most part, yeah. And I think that what you were talking about now with like older rappers like starting to compete with the new generation, or having to like really like introduce themselves and prove themselves to a new generation, whether it's for somebody like Lil Wayne and Jay-Z, I think that that's always like kind of a tough thing to balance. And I think that one way in which it's manifesting right now is with this like Drake and Jay-Z situation, because you have largely relatively newer hip hop listeners who are more attached to Drake than they are to Jay-Z. And now like they want to see somebody like Jay-Z with these, like with this legend status, prove themselves and be able to compete with today's world. And in today's world, post all these beefs that we've been having in recent years, battling and disses and getting the blogs blogging and getting us talking and all that, like that is part of the conversation. So with this sort of debate around potentially Jay-Z and Drake like facing off against each other in a rap beef, like what do you think what do you think younger listeners are kind of like expecting from somebody like Jay-Z to even like prove in the first place?
I'll be honest with you. I think and I've been thinking about this all week. But I've been thinking I think a lot of people expect the Kendrick Drake thing to like happen all over again with Drake and Jay Z, and I don't think that's gonna happen because I'm like Jay Z is very selective about where he chooses to rap and when he chooses to rap. Drake is also chronically online, so we'll always get there'll be some jab from him. I think Chubbs liked some Gilly the Kid post recently dissing. Yeah. So we're always gonna be able to check the temperature with Drake and the OVO camp at large, whereas with Jay-Z we just don't know what's going on with him all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think the expectation will probably be some crazy gladiator showdown, and I just don't think that's the case. I think we might get Drake is probably just going to continue to throw little shots whenever he gets the opportunity. Jay-Z's probably going to throw little shots. Maybe we get actual diss tracks from either of them, but honestly, I just don't think. I don't know how reasonable it is unless there's a Jay-Z album coming. In which case, then I will say that there might be a little bit more to it. But I think in the meantime, it's I think we're overhyping this hypothetical. If it happens, it happens. But I'm not, I don't feel like it's really going to hit a boiling point in the way it did with the Drake and Kendrick thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think people are kind of overhyping the prospect a little bit. Shout out to Wheezy187 on IG. YMCMB era was fire. We need it back. That's also something. That YMCMB support each other. Everybody's kind of dogging on you at the same time. I think a Drake, Nicki, Wayne song, just talking their smack these days would be huge. It would be massive. So I would definitely agree with. Yeah, exactly. So Wheezy187 definitely right with that. But I think another thing to talk about is with the Drake and Kendrick stuff. People were waiting on this for years. I started really, really, really listening to hip hop, and people were like, "When are Kendrick and Drake gonna finally battle? What are these subliminals?" And that is something that had been building up for so long. And Drake and Jay-Z definitely have their history and all that, but they fans don't really look at them as peers as much, in the same way that Kendrick and Drake are from the same sort of class, era, I guess, to put it that, exactly. Same era, and constantly being compared to one another and things like that. And I think that for newer fans, they might not just, maybe they just don't care. People might just not be as interested in what they might have to say to each other because of that difference. But it's also kind of brought up, and this exists in the context of the Kendrick battle because of the Super Bowl and things like that. And it's also has people talking about if Drake couldn't beat Kendrick in a battle, can he beat Jay-Z? Is it a favorable matchup, I guess? I think that's also something that people have been talking about, and something I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on real quick.
I mean, yeah, but it's again, it's what is the battle? First of all, that's I think we need to establish that. What is this a lyrical battle? It's a sales battle? Is it a popularity contest? Which one of these is how are we grading this whole thing? But I think on just a level of the salacious headlines and the wow factor of battling that we've kind of grown accustomed to. Drake's the underdog. Drake has the thing with Drake and Kendrick was that Kendrick could say whatever he wanted about Drake and he was still the underdog in that situation until he wasn't. Whereas with Drake, as I mentioned earlier, he's the underdog to Jay-Z because Jay-Z is nobody's really bigger than Jay-Z in terms of rappers. So it's and if Drake decides to go engage in this in the way he wants to, then it's going to be something that I think is going to be a very dirty battle at the end of the day. And I think like if we're looking at it like that, I think it was Dame that said he could be Kendrick, or Drake could be Kendrick, but not Jay. I
Hmm.
think it's true because Jay has more to lose than Drake at that point, right? And like
Yeah.
Drake had more to lose than Kendrick, so it's like
Hmm.
if Drake is at a point where he's up against Jay Z, then it's like he could say whatever he wants, he could create whatever narrative he wants, and maybe not, it'll stick in the same way that Kendrick's did, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's also like a important part to consider is just like, well, when you are the underdog and when you are having this money talk, like really anything can hit you. And in the same way that anything hit Drake and Drake is still a massive rapper, and anything could have hit Kendrick and Kendrick is still a massive rapper despite everything, and Drake despite everything and all that. Um, Shout out to Jerry Aaron on IG, said we need Wayne, Drake, and Nicki album. That would be fire. Shout
I'll
out to
take
Fabe
one
Don,
song.
who said that beef got out of hand. Jay-Z isn't going to let this get to that, referring to the Kendrick and Drake beef,
Mm,
which I kind of disagree because, Super Ugly exists. And I don't know
that's
if,
what I'm
Jay-Z would go and do that again. But we were talking about this with the Nicki diss earlier, where it's like things could be, personal. So I wouldn't necessarily put that below or beneath Jay-Z, even at, pushing 60. And shout out to Blackbond72, who said Drake is trash. Why would a legend take the trash out? Which is another thing where I
saying.
think people are kind of down. That's the thing, is that with Kendrick and Drake and with other like rap beefs we've seen recently, there's a bit more of an even matchup as far as like the respect that the fan bases have for one another's eras. Like
Mm,
Drake fans and Kendrick fans acknowledge that they are from the same era, and thus their career trajectories are kind of easier to compare and contrast and just
mm,
send these shots at each other and all that. Whereas a lot of Drake fans feel like you are obviously up on Jay-Z for because you're more relevant now, and because he has his, mega personal can of worms. And Jay-Z's fan base is like, you are a billionaire. Drake has his own personal can of worms. Why would you even bother? Like Joe Budden said, like, I don't like that he's dissing these people because you're the biggest rapper in the world.
mm.
And like you shouldn't be like worrying about all this stuff. Like, this is your first performance in years and you're gonna just like start dissing again. So I think that like every opportunity for this to be a strictly like lyrical and music based artistic conversation, if they were to battle, I think is kind of out the window, because not only do the fans not really care that much about that aspect, but the artists themselves. Jay-Z is going to be like, I'm Jay-Z, I'm a billionaire, what do you want me to do? Drake is going
That's
to
the thing.
probably mention like all the disses towards Jay and just recycle them because he can, because the everything is there for people to just kind of like dismiss everything like outright. And so I think that that's just kind of an unfortunate like consequence of all this, is that I just don't think it would have the battle wouldn't have the actual weight behind it that I feel like is warranted, because they've already put everything out there. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And I think shout out to Goyim Matam, who said Drake's catalog is worth way more than Jay-Z's catalog. I think Academic said that recently as well, which has been another debate. And I guess in the technical, I don't know if people are saying that like figuratively or literally. So but I don't know. I
very
think
funny conversation.
that's also just kind of, because again, that's what some people are going to focus on, is just kind
But
of their
I
commercial
mean, but it
dominance.
also goes back to the eras thing you're talking about, because like we're talking
Hmm.
about Jay-Z selling physical CDs, and we're talking about Drake becoming the height of Drake as streaming services made music hella accessible to everybody across the globe.
Hmm.
So I mean, maybe not. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but Drake's put out a lot of music within the past 15 years of his career, like
Yeah.
a very big catalog. And like I think he worked whatever system existed to his advantage, but I don't think like saying his catalog is worth more than Jay-Z's. I don't know how you apples and oranges, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Jay would have definitely taken similar approaches in the streaming era. If that was like
That's it.
the peak of his powers and the peak of him, putting out these like, really like important albums. But even if the fan bases are never really going to, you know, probably look at this in the way that a lot of hip hop fans would want, or most casual hip hop fans will discuss it. Um, do you think there is like a lyrical like who are you taking? Like, do you think that if they were to both drop a diss track against each other at the same time, do you think Jay is outbarring Drake, or does Drake have the leg up on Jay-Z?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say an even playing field, but I think they're both just like they're really like their slick talk is really good.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think I find myself more often listening to Jay Z, whether it's newer stuff or older stuff, and just kind of being like, damn, this guy's good. Like I consistently find myself doing that. Whereas like with Drake, there's like spots, especially like within the past 5 years, where I'm just like, could have been better. I think there's even moments on Iceman where I'm like, like I don't know why you'd say that type of thing. Whereas I feel like with Jay Z, there's way more intent with how he crafts his bars. But I think like overall, I don't think it's like I don't think either of them are like at a place where it's like one is like just going to win over the other. Like if
Mhm.
there's like you know what I mean? I think like Drake has an opportunity to show out, but I would not like just undermine Jay-Z just because he's the older guy in the game.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to I'll Do It Big, who's chiming into this conversation with Jay has better wordplay, Drake has better songs,
This is
which
what I'm saying.
which I kind of rock with that overall. I think it's also because Drake has shown off a lot more songwriting prowess across multiple genres, and I think he's been able to turn that into like these really great sonic experiences, and also things that he can really like do on his own for the most part. Whereas I think that Jay-Z also like knows who to collaborate with when he's trying to make a song that is a little bit out of his depth. So I think that is actually going to be like, because I was going to say like, as far as if one of the biggest kill shots for a beef is like who has the hit, like who makes the hit diss record that is going to be played at clubs, that's going to be Drake for sure. Like
Yeah.
like Jay-Z is going to put out some like amazing music. I don't know if he is going to put out like a hit record that like this new generation is going to go out and like party to in that way, because I don't think they can really beat each other in the traditional sense. Similar to Kendrick and Drake, I feel like they were never really gonna like explicitly beat each other ever, even when like the whole thing started. Obviously things turned out the way in which they did, but so too many people like took that as bad faith that like Drake had to just completely quit from music for Kendrick to win, quote unquote. So I think that that's also just kind of something that's going to happen with with this Jay thing, where both fan bases just have so much defensive ammunition
Mm-hmm.
against one another. I think the thing with Drake lyrically is that he just shoots himself in the foot really often. Like he will have an amazing scheme, he will have an amazing run of lines, and then he will say something that is just kind of like,
Ruins it.
why? Like why is it correct? And it can be like the smallest little thing. Like I keep going back to push-ups because when he said the if you do the split, your pants might rip, something like that. It's like, come on. Like and I think in that aspect, Drake might have the more like mimetic, like, IG caption, Twitter goes crazy, like Jay-Z comments are flooded with one bar getting repeated back. I'm like Rocky recently with the where she at.
Mm.
But he's gonna have those bars, but he's also gonna have a lot more bars on it that are gonna be like, what are you doing? Like why would you say that?
But
So
that goes back to that wordplay comment. Like I think Jay does
mhm.
have the wordplay in the bag, but like Drake definitely has, as you said, he's shown his songwriting across so many different genres at like very high levels at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is going to be something that is really it's going to depend on like what you're looking for, because for somebody like OG Bobby Dash, shout out, who said we talking hip hop and Jay smoked him. Shout out to Wheezy 187, who also said Jay is a legend, but Drake can go against anyone and win musically, which I think is the other part of what we're talking about. It's just like you're not going to remove the love that people have for Drake's music, because he is really able to hit on all cylinders with the fan bases. So I think he has a wider arsenal
Mm.
of like avenues to take. Jay-Z is just so sure that his bars are going to be like really good. and he could obviously shoot
Yeah.
himself in the foot too as well. But it's a bit more rare. Shout out to I'll Do It Big as well, who said Drake will diss you in a hit, Jay will hit you acapella freestyle. I never looked up to them. That also goes into what we were talking about, just like the different approaches. How Jay-Z is probably going to treat this as dirt on his shoulder, whereas I think Drake is more likely to like consistently instigate it on Scary Hours 4, which I'm sure is coming at some point. I'll Do It Big also adds Drake is fighting too many battles at once. J. Sauce ASAP all over the place. Kendrick was able to dial in and dissect him. So that's also kind of something as Drake always is going to be dealing with these big things. But I wanted to real quick bring it back to Wayne a little bit because, Young Money. But Wayne is also a massive Jay-Z fan, and Jay-Z has, allegedly helped him with, like label issues and stuff like that. I wonder if that might be a factor, and whether or not, as we're kind of like wrapping up this combo about, our legends, our old legends, our new legends, like, do you think Wayne is going to be in a hard spot?
I don't see Wayne contributing in any capacity.
Or not contributing, but in that like loyalty aspect.
I don't even. I honestly, I feel like remember when Wayne was on stage and he started saying "Not Like Us" and he was like, everybody was like, "Yo, did he pick Kendrick's side?" Yeah. I think like someone's going to be like, Lil Wayne, just don't leave the studio for the next like 3 months, because I just don't think like I don't know if Wayne could go into a battle with Jay-Z and have his heart in it, but at the same time, like obviously he has to like. It's Drake. That's his protege. You know what I mean? But I don't see him like. I don't know if he'd really be a factor in it, to be honest with you. And if he was, then I think that would maybe be the bigger takeaway than like a Drake versus Jay-Z battle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it would just be interesting to see if it's something that they even reference in tracks. And it also just kind of goes to show that maybe Wayne could have been in this position, where he is still kind of like shooting at people and he's still like really relevant in this combo. And I don't know, maybe in another universe, like there would have been a bit more of an allyship here, or a bit more of a concerted effort to be like, no, it's Young Money versus Roc Nation. But with that being said, having talked about all these, old and new hip hop legends, or Picnic Freestyle, Carter Series, Drake versus Jay-Z. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Aaron, for chopping up with me for this hour. Tune in for the next one. And yeah, great to talk with you, man. It was really fun.
No, likewise, man. Until next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay locked in. Stay up to date on Hot New Hip Hop. We're going to be, covering all the latest as it comes to these stories and more. Aaron and Erica have been putting out some amazing features on these topics as well that y'all should definitely go read. We appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. We're excited for what's to come. It's going to be a big summer. Hopefully it's going to be a big summer, whether or not it's related to these Yankee Stadium shows or other things that are going on in hip hop. Vince Staples just dropped today. Freddie Gibbs, it's a good time. It's a good time. We really appreciate y'all tuning in.
A lot of music out, and I'm sure a lot of eventful things on the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and take care, everybody.
Peace and love, everyone.
Peace and love.